The silent cargo. Humanity had only been a member of the galactic community for 20 years, but already they had earned a reputation among the stars. Curious, stubborn, and dangerously unwilling to ignore things that didn't make sense. Older civilizations had long learned that peace in the galaxy often depended on looking the other way. Questions were inconvenient, investigations were disruptive, and some truths were simply better left buried. Humans, however, had never been very good at ignoring problems. Commander Elena Varga of the Terran patrol ship Resolute was a perfect example. The Resolute was conducting a routine escort mission along the Orion trade corridor, one of the busiest shipping routes connecting dozens of star systems. Merchant vessels from many different civilizations traveled through this region every day, carrying minerals, food, machinery, and rare resources between worlds. It was supposed to be an uneventful assignment, but space had a way of revealing secrets when people least expected it. "Commander," said Lieutenant Harris from the sensor station, "we're detecting a drifting vessel approximately 2 million kilometers ahead. No active engines." Varga looked up from her console. "Identity." Harris frowned at the screen. "Transponder is active. Zhar'Keth Combine registry." That caught Varga's attention immediately. The Zhar'Keth Combine was one of the most powerful economic powers in the galaxy. Their merchant fleets dominated interstellar trade, and their corporations controlled industries across dozens of systems. A drifting ship belonging to them was unusual. "Any distress signal?" Varga asked. "Negative," Harris replied. "No communication attempts at all." Varga stood and walked toward the main display. A long, angular cargo vessel slowly rotated in the darkness of space. Its hull bore the distinctive golden insignia of the Zhar'Keth merchant guilds. At first glance, the vessel didn't look heavily damaged, but something was clearly wrong. "Bring us closer," Varga ordered. The Resolute glided toward the silent cargo ship. As the distance closed, more details became visible. Burn marks along the hull, several damaged antenna arrays, and a disabled engine section. "Looks like it was attacked," Harris said. "Or sabotaged," Varga replied quietly. She crossed her arms. "Open a communication channel." The comm officer tried several frequencies before finally receiving a response. A harsh, clicking voice answered. "This is Captain Trelvac of the merchant vessel Golden Exchange. State your business." Varga noticed something immediately. The voice sounded tense. "This is Commander Elena Varga of the Terran patrol ship Resolute," she said calmly. "We detected your vessel drifting without propulsion. Are you requesting assistance?" There was a short pause. "No assistance required," the captain replied quickly. "We have the situation under control." Varga raised an eyebrow. "Your engines appear disabled, Captain. We will repair them shortly." Another pause followed. Varga glanced toward Harris, who was studying the ship's data feed. He quietly shook his head. The engines were completely dead. "Captain," Varga continued, "galactic safety regulations require patrol vessels to investigate potentially disabled ships along major trade routes. I'll need to review your cargo manifest." The silence this time was longer. Finally, the captain responded. "Cargo manifest transmitted." The file appeared on Varga's display. She studied it carefully. The manifest listed only one item: biological units. No additional description. No species classification. No quantity. Varga frowned. "Captain," she said slowly, "please clarify the nature of your cargo." "Agricultural livestock," the Zhar'Keth replied immediately. "Destination?" "Private colony world." Varga leaned closer to the screen. Something about the answer felt rehearsed. "Understood," she said. "For safety verification, we will send a small inspection team aboard." The response came instantly. "That will not be necessary." Now Varga was certain something was wrong. "Captain," she said firmly, "this is a standard procedure." Another long silence followed. Then the transmission ended. The bridge of the Resolute grew quiet. "Well," Harris muttered, "that didn't sound suspicious at all." Varga turned toward the tactical officer. "Prepare a boarding shuttle." Minutes later, a small Terran boarding craft approached the cargo vessel. Varga herself led the inspection team, accompanied by 4 armed Marines and a technical specialist. The docking hatch opened with a slow mechanical hiss. The interior of the ship was dark and eerily quiet. Emergency lighting flickered along the corridor walls. "Life signs?" Varga asked. The tech officer checked his scanner. "Crew present, but most of the signals are coming from the cargo hold." "Livestock," one of the Marines joked quietly. Varga didn't respond. They moved carefully through the corridors until they reached the cargo bay doors. The doors were sealed by a heavy containment field. Military grade. That definitely wasn't normal for transporting animals. "Override the lock," Varga ordered. The technician worked quickly at the control panel. With a deep mechanical rumble, the doors slowly slid open. The team stepped inside, and then everyone froze. Rows upon rows of cryogenic pods filled the massive chamber. Thousands of them, each one glowing faintly with pale blue light. Inside every pod was a living being. Some had insect-like limbs. Others had scales or fur. A few looked disturbingly similar to mammals. All of them were unconscious. All of them were restrained by neural control implants embedded into their skulls. Varga felt a cold weight settle in her chest. "These aren't animals," one of the Marines whispered. "No," Varga said quietly. Her scanner confirmed it. Every life form in the cargo hold showed signs of advanced neural activity. Sentient intelligence. People. Thousands of them. The truth struck her instantly. "This isn't livestock," she said. Her voice hardened. "It's a slave transport." Suddenly alarms blared across the ship. The tech officer looked up in panic. "Commander, multiple hyperspace signatures." Varga rushed to her wrist display. 3 warships had just arrived. All of them belonged to the Zhar'Keth Combine, and their weapons were already charging. "They're targeting the Resolute." Harris's voice crackled over the comm. Varga stared at the sleeping prisoners surrounding her. The galaxy had outlawed slavery centuries ago. Yet somehow it had never disappeared. It had simply been hidden. "Commander," Harris said urgently. "They're preparing to fire." Varga made her decision instantly. "Start emergency evacuation," she ordered. "We're taking these people with us." She looked around the cargo bay one more time. Humanity had just uncovered a terrible secret, and, judging by the warships outside, someone was willing to kill to keep it hidden. The hidden empire. The journey back to human-controlled space was tense and silent. The Resolute had escaped the Zhar'Keth warships by the narrowest margin. Emergency hyperspace jumps pushed the ship's engines beyond safe limits, and several systems had nearly overheated during the desperate retreat. But Commander Elena Varga had managed to bring the ship home, and she hadn't come alone. Inside the cargo bays of the Resolute, hundreds of cryogenic pods had been carefully transferred from the captured slave transport before the human vessel fled the battle zone. The crew had worked for hours during hyperspace travel, stabilizing life support systems and ensuring that the imprisoned beings inside the pods remained alive. The ship's medical team quickly confirmed what Varga had already suspected. Every individual inside the pods was a sentient species. Many of them had never even been cataloged in official galactic records. By the time the Resolute arrived at Earth's orbital command station, the situation had already escalated far beyond a routine investigation. Within hours, representatives of the Terran Assembly, military command, and scientific institutions gathered to examine the evidence. The discovery shook human leadership to its core. Dr. Samuel Adebayo, one of Earth's leading xenobiologists, studied the scans with visible disbelief. "These implants," he said, pointing to the neural control devices embedded in the prisoners' nervous systems. "They're designed to suppress independent thought." He shook his head slowly. Whoever built this system wasn't just controlling labor. They were controlling entire minds. Commander Vargas stood beside the medical display. "How many are there?" she asked. "From the transport ship alone?" Adebayo replied. "Over 12,000 individuals." The room fell silent. But that number was only the beginning. Human intelligence analysts began digging deeper into Zhar'Keth trade records. At first, the shipping data looked normal. Thousands of cargo routes transporting materials across the galaxy. But once analysts started comparing routes, cargo types, and ship activity patterns, a disturbing picture began to form. Many cargo vessels carried vague classifications similar to the one Varga had seen, biological units. The destinations were often remote industrial systems, mining worlds, construction planets, dangerous environments where normal workers rarely volunteered to go. Slowly, the truth began to reveal itself. The Zhar'Keth Combine had built a hidden empire. For centuries, entire civilizations from poorly protected systems had been quietly raided or manipulated into debt bondage. Their populations were captured, transported, and forced into labor under neural control. Their existence erased from official galactic databases. To the rest of the galaxy, these species had simply disappeared. But the deeper the investigation went, the worse the discovery became. The Zhar'Keth weren't the only ones involved. Evidence pointed to powerful corporations, trading guilds, and even political figures across multiple star systems benefiting from the slave network. Illegal mining operations, hazardous research facilities, massive construction projects in dangerous planetary environments. Many of them were being powered by enslaved labor. The galactic economy, it seemed, was quietly built on a foundation of chains. When humanity presented the evidence to the Galactic Council, the reaction was immediate and hostile. The council chamber, located on a neutral diplomatic station near the galactic core, filled with representatives from dozens of alien civilizations. Commander Varga stood beside the Terran ambassador as the evidence was displayed across the chamber's central holographic projection. Images of the cryogenic pods rotated slowly in the air. Medical scans of neural implants. Rescue footage from a slave ship. A long silence followed. Then the Zhar'Keth representative rose from his platform. His tall insectoid frame towered over many of the other delegates. "This accusation," he said sharply, "is fabricated." Murmurs spread across the chamber. The Terran ambassador frowned. "Fabricated?" he repeated. "We have physical evidence." The Zhar'Keth representative's compound eyes glowed with cold anger. "What you possess," he said, "is stolen property." Gasps erupted from several delegates. "Those individuals," the Zhar'Keth continued, "are legally contracted laborers operating under Combine authority." Commander Varga clenched her fists. "Contracted?" she said quietly. "They have mind control implants. Necessary safety measures," the alien replied. The chamber erupted into heated debate. Some species seemed disturbed by the evidence. Others remained suspiciously quiet. But one thing became clear very quickly. The council had no intention of taking action. Finally, the presiding moderator raised a clawed hand for silence. "This matter requires further review," the moderator declared. "Until that time, the Terran government is instructed to return the recovered biological assets to the Zhar'Keth Combine." The words echoed through the chamber. "Return them. Return the slaves." Commander Varga stared at the council members in disbelief. "You want us to give them back?" she said. The moderator's voice remained calm. "That is the council's directive." The Terran ambassador slowly turned toward her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he looked back toward the council. "No," he said simply. The chamber erupted again. "You refuse a lawful directive?" the moderator demanded. The ambassador's voice was firm. "We refuse slavery." The Zhar'Keth representative hissed angrily. "You will regret this defiance, humans." Perhaps they believed it was a threat that would frighten humanity into silence. They didn't understand humans very well. Within 24 hours, Earth made a decision that would change the galaxy forever. Human networks broadcast every piece of evidence they had uncovered. To everyone, every colony, every independent system, every species. Images of the cryogenic slave pods spread across the galactic communication grid like wildfire. Testimonies from newly awakened survivors followed soon after. Stories of destroyed homes, captured families, entire populations vanishing into darkness. Across the galaxy, people began asking the same question. Where had their missing civilizations gone? The answer was finally visible, and the reaction was explosive. Slave revolts erupted across dozens of hidden labor worlds. Mining facilities shut down overnight. Transport convoys were hijacked. Entire industrial sectors collapsed as enslaved workers fought back against their captors. For centuries, the truth had been hidden. Now it was everywhere. The Zhar'Keth Combine issued a formal declaration hours later. Humanity had been labeled a rogue civilization, enemy of galactic stability. Their fleets were mobilizing. War was coming, but by then, it was already too late. Humanity had uncovered the truth, and the chains holding the galaxy together were starting to break. The Liberation War. War did not arrive with a single battle. It began with silence. For weeks after the Galactic Council declared humanity a rogue civilization, the stars seemed almost calm. Trade routes continued to operate. Diplomatic channels still flickered with cautious messages, and the vast machinery of galactic commerce kept moving as it always had. But beneath the surface, something had changed. The truth was spreading. Across hundreds of star systems, the images broadcast by humanity could no longer be ignored. Billions of citizens had seen the cryogenic pods, the neural implants, and the terrified faces of species that had been erased from history. Entire civilizations began asking questions, and the answers made many powerful governments nervous. Meanwhile, the Zhar'Keth Combine was preparing for war. Their fleets began assembling in the outer regions of their territory. Massive warships, cargo carriers converted into troop transports, and long-range assault cruisers gathered into enormous armadas. The Combine leadership believed the solution was simple: destroy humanity quickly, erase the evidence, restore control. They expected the war to last weeks, perhaps months. They had no idea what they were about to face. On Earth, the Terran Defense Command had already shifted into full wartime mobilization. Human fleets were smaller than those of the older galactic powers, but they were fast, adaptable, and commanded by officers who understood something the slavers did not. Wars were not won by fleets alone. They were won by strategy. Admiral Marcus Leong stood inside the command center aboard the human flagship TDF Horizon, studying a holographic map of nearby star systems. Red markers identified confirmed slave worlds. Blue markers showed human task forces moving quietly into position. "We cannot defeat the Combine in a direct confrontation," Leong explained to his officers. "Their fleet numbers are too large." He pointed toward the glowing slave systems scattered across the map. "But their empire is fragile." The officers watched carefully. "Their economy depends on forced labor," Leong continued. "Shut down the slave network, and their entire infrastructure collapses." The plan was simple. Human forces would not attack the Combine's main fleets. Instead, they would attack the chains holding the Empire together. The first strike began in the Tarsus Expanse. The mining world of Keeler 9 was one of the Combine's largest extraction facilities. Millions of enslaved workers operated deep underground, harvesting rare metals from an unstable asteroid cluster. When a human fleet arrived, they didn't bombard the planet. They hacked it. Terran cyber warfare specialists infiltrated the control networks managing the slave implants. Within minutes, the neural suppression signals collapsed across the entire mining colony. Millions of prisoners suddenly regained control of their minds. For the first time in years, confusion quickly turned into rage. Slave overseers were overwhelmed within hours. Mining machines were turned into weapons. By the time the Zhar'Keth security fleet arrived, the colony had already fallen, and the newly freed population was broadcasting their story across the stars. That was only the beginning. Human fleets began striking slave facilities across multiple sectors. Instead of destroying them, they liberated them. Industrial worlds, construction planets, hidden prison systems. Every successful operation freed thousands, sometimes millions, of new allies. Many of them were soldiers. Some had once been warriors before their civilizations were conquered. Others had spent years dreaming about revenge. Now, they had a chance. Soon the war spread far beyond human fleets. Rebellions erupted everywhere. Transport ships carrying slaves were seized by their prisoners. Mining colonies turned their weapons against combined forces. Entire garrisons vanished overnight. The Zhar'Keth leadership suddenly faced a nightmare scenario. They weren't fighting one enemy. They were fighting hundreds. Admiral Liang watched the reports arrive with quiet satisfaction. "Status of the outer sectors?" he asked. An intelligence officer looked up from her console. "Slave uprisings confirmed on 12 worlds," she said. 3 more Combine shipyards have shut down due to worker revolts. Liang nodded. Exactly as predicted. The Combine responded with brutal force. Their fleets began destroying rebellious colonies to prevent them from joining humanity. But every atrocity only strengthened the resistance. For every world they crushed, 2 more rose in rebellion. Within months, the Zhar'Keth economy began collapsing. Supply chains shattered. Mining production fell by nearly 70%. Ship construction slowed to a crawl, and still the rebellion spread. The galaxy had spent centuries ignoring the suffering hidden inside the Combine's slave empire. Now that suffering had turned into fury. But the Zhar'Keth leadership refused to surrender. Their rulers activated the last weapon they had left, the homeworld fleet. It was the largest military force the Combine possessed. Thousands of warships stationed around their capital system. They had kept it in reserve for centuries, meant to defend their empire from external threats. Now, they were sending it to destroy humanity. Admiral Liang studied the new intelligence report with a calm expression. "Estimated numbers?" he asked. "Over 3,000 warships," the officer replied. Several commanders exchanged uneasy glances. That fleet alone outnumbered the entire human navy. Liang folded his hands behind his back. "Good," he said. The officers looked at him in surprise. "Admiral," one asked. Liang gestured toward the tactical map again. New signals were appearing across the projection. Ships from dozens of different civilizations. Former slave fleets. Rebel armadas. Liberated worlds, sending everything they had. "They're not coming just for us," Liang said quietly. For centuries, the Zhar'Keth had ruled through fear. Now the victims of that empire were gathering together. And this time, they were not fighting alone. Humanity had started the rebellion, but the entire galaxy was about to finish it. The end of the chains. The final battle began in silence. Across the vast darkness of space surrounding the Zhar'Keth home system, fleets slowly emerged from hyperspace. One by one, hundreds of ships appeared, sleek human warships, battered rebel cruisers, and vessels from civilizations that had once been forced to serve the slave empire. The Zhar'Keth capital world, Zhar'Tal Prime, glowed beneath them like a jewel surrounded by weapons. Massive orbital defense platforms formed rings around the planet. Thousands of warships guarded the system, each one armed with heavy cannons and shield arrays capable of tearing apart entire fleets. For centuries, this system had been untouchable, the center of an empire built on control and fear. Now it was surrounded. Admiral Marcus Liang stood on the command deck of the Terran flagship TDF Horizon, watching the growing armada assemble on the tactical display. Human ships formed the center of the formation, but the majority of the fleet surrounding Zhar'Tal Prime no longer belonged to Earth. They belonged to the freed. Alien vessels of every shape and size joined the formation. Some are old cargo ships converted into warships. Others were advanced military vessels once operated by the Combine itself, now turned against their former masters. Entire civilizations had come to this system, not just to fight, to end something that had lasted far too long. A communications officer turned toward Liang. "Admiral, enemy fleet is mobilizing." The main Zhar'Keth fleet began moving into defensive formation around the planet. Thousands of ships formed massive layered battle lines designed to overwhelm any attacker. Their commander finally opened a transmission channel. A towering insectoid figure appeared on the screen, its compound eyes glowing with cold fury. "You have made a grave mistake, humans," the Zhar'Keth war leader hissed. "This system is the heart of the Combine. You will not survive here." Liang remained calm. "This war ends today," he replied. The alien's mandibles twitched. "You believe these rebels can defeat us?" Liang glanced at the tactical display again. Dozens of new hyperspace signatures were still appearing. More fleets. More survivors. More allies. No, Liang said quietly. They already have. The battle began seconds later. The Zhar'Keth fired first. A storm of plasma and kinetic fire erupted from their defensive lines, streaking across the void toward the approaching fleets. But the Allied armada did not slow. Human cruisers moved forward with precise coordination, their shield systems absorbing the first wave of enemy fire. Behind them, dozens of smaller rebel ships scattered through the battlefield, attacking from unexpected angles. The battle quickly turned chaotic. Zhar'Keth commanders had expected to face a single organized fleet. Instead, they were surrounded by hundreds of independent forces attacking from every direction. Former slave pilots knew the Combine's tactics intimately. They had served aboard those ships. They knew their weaknesses. Rebel fleets slipped through defensive gaps and targeted weapon platforms. Human strike teams launched boarding operations against command vessels. Within minutes, several Zhar'Keth cruisers exploded into clouds of burning debris. Admiral Liang watched the battle unfold with quiet focus. Focus fire on the orbital defense grid, he ordered. Human battleships unleashed coordinated volleys against the massive weapon stations orbiting Zhar'Keth Prime. One by one, the platforms collapsed under the relentless assault. Without their defenses, the Combine fleet began losing ground. And then something unexpected happened. Several Zhar'Keth warships suddenly powered down. Their engines went dark. Weapons systems shut off. On the bridge of the horizon, officers exchanged confused looks. "Admiral, we're receiving transmissions from those ships," the comm officer said. "Put it through." The screen flickered. Instead of the usual Zhar'Keth command officers, a different figure appeared. A tall reptilian alien wearing a damaged uniform. "We have taken control of this vessel," the alien said. Liang understood instantly. Even within the Combine's fleets, many crew members had once been slaves, and now they had chosen a side. Across the battlefield, more ships began defecting. Some turned their weapons on their former allies. Others simply surrendered. The massive Zhar'Keth defensive line began collapsing from within. Within hours, the once invincible homeworld fleet was shattered. The remaining Zhar'Keth command ships attempted to flee the system. Human interceptors were faster. They were captured before they could escape. By the end of the day, the battle was over. The empire that had ruled through chains for centuries had fallen. Days later, representatives from dozens of civilizations gathered aboard a neutral station near Zhar'Keth Prime. The former rulers of the Combine were brought before them. For the first time in centuries, the slavers faced the people they had enslaved. The tribunal lasted months. Evidence was presented. Witnesses spoke. Survivors told stories of entire worlds stolen, families separated, and civilizations nearly erased. When the trials ended, the verdict was unanimous. The Zhar'Keth slave empire would be dismantled completely. Their territories would be placed under international oversight. Every enslaved civilization would be granted full independence and protection under a new galactic charter. But the most important decision came last. A new law was written into galactic governance, a law proposed by humanity. Slavery would never again be tolerated anywhere in the galaxy. Not hidden behind corporations, not disguised as contracts, not ignored for the sake of profit, because the last time someone tried to hide it, humans uncovered the truth, and the slavers never stood a chance.